will be given, and we basically have a and we have will be given. You basically have a person that's known as a run chief, which kind of organizes everybody. And for Milwaukee, I was one of the two run chiefs. Another gentleman from Ohio was the run chief, our co-run chief. Was the run chief, our co-run chief with me. For Grand Rapids, I'm also going to be the co-run chief again, being that I did all the contact, being that chief again, being that I did all the contacts with the National Train Show Committee. I figured I could do all that type of stuff again, and this time we'll have a gentleman from the Detroit, Michigan area that'll be my co-run chief, and that's more or less. So if one, and that's more or less. So if one of us are walking around enjoying the show, we can have the opportunity. We can show. We can have show. We can have the opportunity of doing that, and if somebody has an issue with something not performing correctly, if I'm not there, the other co-run chief can fill in the gaps and take care of any issues that may come in place with the layout during the show.
But I guess even with the best laid plans, there's potentials due to work commitments and other things that certain sections may not turn up. I think we've actually covered this on a show previously. But what's your standard strategy? You arrive there, you've got maybe a small section or maybe even a larger section attached to someone who can't make it. You've then got to reshuffle everything round, don't you?
Well, luckily with Milwaukee, there was one gentleman that was going to come from Colorado with some modules, but he notified us about I think it was about 2 to 3 weeks before the show, stating that before the show, stating that he couldn't come to the show because he was moving halfway across the United States, and he wouldn't be able to attend the show. So luckily, the gentleman that was working on the track plan was able to reshuffle the track plan design. However, we did have one little glitch that when some individuals submitted their shapes of their modules to the gentleman that was working on the track plan. They didn't submit the dimensions properly for the modules, and luckily we had a gentleman from the Minnesota Fremo group that brought an extra module with him. Otherwise, we would have had our 2 staging yards occupying the same square footage in our area. So luckily, with that extra module that was brought, that was never really in the plans, we were able to not have not have a interference of two module sets.
So, in terms of operating HO and N modules together, do you keep them physically separate, or do you actually like to create geometries where the two layout components almost kind of not intertwine in terms of connecting track, obviously, but intertwine in terms of the way that they wander around the space?
Well, the N scale well the N scale in
Around the space.
the N scale and HO Fremo layouts will be two separate independent layouts. As far layouts as far, as layouts as far as having the HO and N scale Fremo in the same space, in the same same uh, same space as far as the square footage that we'll be getting. Right now. The way that the preliminary track plan was preliminary that the the way that the preliminary track plan was submitted plan was submitted to the NMRA to try to get our space. The N space, the N scale Fremo was more of a U-shaped layout, while the HO Fremo was kind of surrounding the N scale Fremo. Depending on the actual space, the N scale Fremo. Depending on the actual space we're giving, that may vary. Maybe the HO